Okay. All right, guys. Welcome to another podcast of the Sharma show. The pod is back after a little bit of a break. So thank you to everyone that's joining us today live, and thank you to everyone that's going to be watching us later on as well. I really appreciate everyone listening in. Today we've got a very interesting episode for you. Again, something that affects a part of Indian culture, which is sort of, I feel like, a broader attempt at maligning like every little part of Indian culture to it's sort of death by a thousand cuts, a style operation. So to discuss this with me, first of all, is Neha Srivastava. Neha, welcome and happy Holi to you.
Happy Holi to you, Sham, and all of your listeners. I'm really excited to talk about all of this with you, especially with Holi being right upon us.
Right.
This is perfect time to discuss this, so I'm really thankful for giving me the opportunity to talk.
No, absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And I think the moment is very opportune to talk about this because, over the past few weeks and months, we've seen some of these campaigns around on social media. Stuff like Reclaim Holi and Holi against Hindutva, and fun stuff like that. Let me just share a couple of these with the audience so I can read them out if you can't see them.
Yes.
And it's very interesting. A couple of these. So here it goes. So this Holi against Hindutva movement, which is basically this movement started in certain colleges, American colleges by Indian origin students, and it's teaching people how to celebrate Holi the right way and how to talk about Holi the right way. And they're saying desist from celebrating it yourself and resist cultural attempts to whitewash its violent history. There are other ways to build community and practice tradition that don't begin with violent conquest and the immolation of a Bahujan femme. Use that time to gather and celebrate your friends, educate folks about Brahmanical control of the history of India, and connect it to the rise of the BJP and the upper caste networks of power. The ironic part is that the prime minister of the country is not an upper caste, but whatever. This Holi, students against Hindutva are organizing actions on campuses to call attention to the violent, history of Holi and all that fun stuff. So that's basically where we're at. And you've got, so-called these Hindu organizations in America that are offering its letter of support to a Holi against Hindutva. This is Hindus for Human Rights and all of that kind of fun stuff. So you've got this, idea which has been, from what it looks like, fomented in American universities, which is like a lot of other problems in the United States, left-leaning problems in the United States, seems to originate in the universities. And so there's this idea now being floated, and we were talking about this offline, and it was something that you enlightened me on as well, that this is not a new idea. This is something that's existed in sort of Western academia and within the liberal circles for a while, that about every aspect of Indian culture, Hindu culture, being a Brahmanical imposition. It's something that the Brahmins took over the society and forced these cultural aspects of India upon the rest of the population. And Holi seems to be one of those two. Like it's this Brahmanical imposition. So I read an article that you wrote on India Facts that I'll put that article in the description that people can go and read as well. It's called Holi, Let the Subaltern Speak. And you talk about the origins of Holi in that article. And I think it's a fantastic article, and really, I think it should open the eyes of a lot of, normal people, if they're not already completely set in their ways, about the origin of Holi. So do you want to give us a little bit of a background about the sort of origins of Holi and how Holi is celebrated or started being celebrated in various parts of India?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for actually starting a conversation on this topic, because this is one of the very less understood aspects that a lot of course, Westerners do not understand this, but most certainly a lot of Indians do not understand this either. So before we get into that,
Right.
it was actually a two-piece part article that appeared on shaktitva.org. So the first part of the article talks about the subaltern celebration. So I list with references, several.
So if you could just, sorry, Neha, to cut you off, but if you could just give a little definition so people can understand what you mean when you say subaltern.
Yes, I was getting to that.
Okay.
So the first article is the many shades of holy. And before we get into what we understand into the holy part, the Marxist understanding, and the reason I say Marxist understanding is because the Marxist theory is used often to understand societies that were previously colonized, and because it allows a framework to understand the differences or what would happen if you started looking at a society from an oppressor-oppressed point of view. And see, these are all lenses. Marxist is a lens. It's not the description. It's not the only description. It's not the only way to look at something, but it is one of the ways of understanding a society. So it is not necessarily inherently biased. But of course, if you are doing a controlled experiment where you want to see what happens to this chemical if I start looking at it this way,
right?
And then you say this is the only truth, the second part is the problem. There's no problem if you're trying to understand what are the different forces at play, but then you start projecting that as the only and one and only truth, that becomes the problem. There has been a lot of criticism of the various interpretations that have been done in post-colonial societies by looking at them only from one potential way. Because one of the important things that the lenses often forget to understand, especially the Marxist lens, is that it does not understand the wide diversity of interplay that happens in traditions. Because it comes from a point of view of a monotheistic society, because Marx grew up in a monotheistic society. So there was, one my way or highway. And then he's looking at the people in power who are imposing this my way or highway upon the people who are disagreeing. So this is one way of looking at it. But in India, first of all, India has never been a monotheistic society, at least primarily. And Hinduism, which forms the dominant culture and the dominant religion of the country, actually affords a philosophical path where many, many ways of looking at things can coexist, right? You could worship Kali and I could worship Shiva, and it is beautiful together because they're also married to each other.
Right.
And the ways of worshiping is actually very different, right? If you look at how Vishnu is worshipped, it's a very the form of worship is very different from the way how Kali is worshipped or Bhairava is worshipped. So all of these differences are not points of conflict for us. So on the same line, in the first part of the article, which was the many shades of holy, I try to bring out that aspect of holy because the word subaltern, as defined by most social scientists, talks about the parts of population of this parts of the society or the populations that are not part of the elite power making structures. Like they're not part of power structures. They're not elites. They are not able to impose their views upon others. So those sections of the society for India would be, say, the rural population, right? Because most of the policy making happens in cities. So often the rural population is left behind. There's a lot of poverty there. So there will be rural population. Then there would be the tribal population, the various tribes. And I'm not just talking about the scheduled tribes that are denotified tribes. There's actually a lot more tribes that are not all scheduled necessarily. So there's a lot of those tribal traditions. Then there were the nomadic tribes, whose primary task or the primary form of both, like their primary element of their culture was storytelling and dance and music. So there's a lot of those subcultures that happily have coexisted for centuries in India. And so these would, because they are not part of the mainstream power forming structure, and they were not part of it before, they're not part of it today. So even under Mughal rule, they were not, they were not very liked, because a lot of these tribes are also have a militaristic, tradition. So obviously the invaders and the various types of colonialists did not like these not docile people.
Right.
Who could not be bought by the lure of government jobs, or they had a very simple way of life, and they just wanted to live it, and they would not surrender easily. That's the
Right.
best way to put it, I think. They were not very much liked by any of the various conquests that have happened. The British actually waged pretty much a war against those. If you might have heard the word Thug.
Thug, yes.
Yes, Thug is actually a tribe.
Yes.
And the negative connotations that the British associated with Thug was because the Thug tribe completely refused the subjugation of the British,
Wow.
and it would cause a lot of problems for them. They actually banned entire tribes because those tribes were too morally repulsive for the British's, Victorian tastes. Not surprisingly, a lot of those ended up being the tribes that worshipped the goddess.
Right.
Because there is this very interesting tradition where all the goddess worshipping tribes end up being militaristically aligned.
Oh, wow.
So you might have heard of Dantewada.
Yes.
It's a part of it's in
Chhattisgarh.
Chhattisgarh, northwestern India. So Dantewada tradition is actually very goddess oriented, and they are also very militaristic.
I mean, if you look at, if we extend that same comparison, if that same template to like Guru Gobind Singh as well, who's also someone that was very goddess worshipping and founded the sect of Khalsa.
Yes, and therefore you would say, and you could see very clearly that the British did not like him.
Yeah.
Before that, the Mughals did not like him.
Yes.
Because all of these militaristically aligned, inclined tribes were actually a big, thorn on the side of all of these occupiers, and they would never let them rest happily, and they would never be able to, just extend it like a regular colony, that the kind of ease they had in other colonies that was not afforded to them in India. And one of the reasons was these tribes. So all of these tribes have for a very long period of time have been not part of the power structures. Even today, though we have in democratic India, we have tried to come up with some sort of reservation. We have tried to come up with ways to engage them politically. They still remain very much marginalized when it comes to politics and policy making. So the subaltern, in that sense, the term subaltern would apply to these rural and tribal people who are away from the political structures, and therefore the subaltern, right? Like they're not they're not very visible. So here, the interesting thing about Holi is that Holi is actually primarily a subaltern festival. So and now to kind of give the context to the audience who are not aware, there's the alternative to subaltern that our favorite Indian Marxist scholars have created is the Brahminic, right? Which is hilarious, because actually there's been a lot of criticism of this Brahminism as a concoction. When they say Brahminism, 80% of the time they mean all of Hinduism.
Yeah.
But if they said Hinduism, it would be very obviously bigoted. So they created this term called Brahminism. Roots of this Brahminism theory are now in this mythical Aryan invasion theory that has been, proven to be wrong several times over.
Right.
There is now genetic evidence against it. There is, the linguistic evidence against it. There's a lot of going on. And in either situations, whether or not there was a population exchange from the steppes is a more or less academic question, because the timelines that the original Indian Marxists were thinking about was literally a few thousand years ago.
Right.
And genetic evidence has conclusively proved that the timeline has shifted far before that. So if there was ever any population exchange that happened in prehistoric times, so the idea that Vedas were brought upon to us by Aryans, and all of this, Vedic religion is invader religion, is all disproven.
Yeah,
But
the other thing also is there, Neha, that the argument people always make, or the proponents of the AIT, they only ever hear them making the genetic argument. Only. You will never hear them make the linguistic argument or the cultural argument, because they know that if they go down that road, that's a very dangerous road for them.
Actually, genetic evidence is highly, highly prove it
No,
is
I
very,
agree. I agree with you
yeah.
there. The only point that I'm making is that the reason they only bring up the genetic argument is they can say, fine, at this point there was a little bit of a population admixture or whatever, so and so came from so and settled down in India. We can at least dig at that a little bit and say, oh, look, Aryan invasion theory. The thing is, if they go down the genetic or the linguistic or the cultural aspect of it, they'll see that Indic languages and Indic culture existed well before any of this quote unquote population
Yeah,
exchange happened.
exactly.
So the whole
And
idea that Indian culture came from overseas would be completely destroyed. So they
and
stay
the
off of
whole
it like the
history
plague.
of this has been beautifully explained and explored by Vishwa Arluri and Joydeep Bagchi's work
Yeah.
in the Nay Science. There's been overwhelming evidence that Indology was actually started studying India in the first place because of ulterior motives to prove the Western civilization to be superior, because they had to prove chronological progress in order to keep the myth of Jesus alive, because the enlightenment happened with Jesus, so
Yeah.
anything before Jesus cannot possibly be better.
Yes.
So that is why you move forward, you
Right.
progress, and every time you go back it's regress and all of that stuff. So this is actually, Vishwa explores this much more beautifully than ever I can ever do that. But what I would try to focus on is that if you look at the very tradition of Holi, right, from a very sociological point of view, the first piece of Holi is a very is the burning the Holika Dehen that we say, or
Right.
the bonfire. And so the tradition is, you have this bonfire that which is made with sticks. It is made with cow dung cakes often, and it is dry wood and all of that. So people just literally collect a lot of dried wood and dried leaves, and bring it in one place, and they burn that. So this is not a coincidence. You can see these patterns across many indigenous traditions, not just even Indian ones. The Cherokee people have the Green Moon Festival. The sorry, in the Sam, if I'm not wrong, there's a lot of this happening. The bonfires happen during Samayan tradition in
Right.
pre-Christian Europe. And there's several, even in Australian Aboriginal tribes, you have the similar bonfire rituals. These bonfire rituals almost always happen around the harvest season.
Right.
They happen on full moon nights, or they
Right.
happen on equinoxes or solstices. These are the astronomically sacred times that most indigenous traditions before organized religion came into play used to celebrate those aligning of the planets in a certain way. And you see the same elements in Holi. So Holi happens around the vernal equinox. The tradition, and now if I am to compare, if I am to take them at their word, and this is what I do in the let the subaltern speak, I am not contradicting the entire Brahminism and subaltern thing. What I'm trying to prove is, even if you take their classifications at their word, Holi does not stand their test,
Right.
because what they associate with Brahminism is bunch of Brahmins in their in their punul, in their with the janeu and with the dhoti, chanting
Right.
mantras and doing homams. So now this is very distinct from that homam, first of all, because homam is done with sacred wood, or with with specific types of wood, preferably mango wood, or even like more expensive types of wood. It is almost always done in a quiet place, with mostly the people sitting down and chanting and pouring stuff in it. This
Right.
is very different. This is a very boisterous celebration. It is more like Sankranti.
Right.
And across, and you can see again instances of on the same day of Sankranti, a lot of cultures celebrate their own harvest festivals. So this is a boisterous festival. We do not use expensive wood, or the typical wood that is used for festivals,
Right.
that is used for homams. We do not use havan samagri. We do not, well, most of the time we can't even afford to put ghee into it. So it's literally dry wood that we've picked up from wherever. The
Right.
fuel is cow dung cakes,
Right.
which is a very rural thing to do.
Right.
Cow dung cakes are very commonly used as fuel. And you would have people literally sometimes throw garbage into it.
Right.
So you'd sweep your floors and you take out the garbage, and that is symbolic because you're taking out the evil and the dirt and the negativity out of your homes
Yeah.
and
And it's a
burning
fresh
it into
start.
and
Yeah.
burning it into the sacred fires of Holika.
Yeah.
And so this is now that itself, it is very clear that this is not a typical Brahminical ritual. There's no mantra chanting that I know of. I've never heard of it. Of course, because this is an auspicious time, people do have their own pujas, especially in southern India. But in northern India, the Holika Dahan is not a typical. And by the way, most importantly, no priest is required.
Right.
Right. So literally anybody.
It's more of like a community thing, right?
Yes. In fact, anybody and everybody should participate.
Yeah. So I wanted to so I wanted to just sort of take you towards because one of the things that I read in your article as well was the sort of regional origins of Holi, and how like the same festival or the same sort of time of the year is celebrated with different names across different parts of India.
Yes, so Phagwa is one very popular name.
Yeah.
But Phagwa and Holi are basically the same thing,
yes.
right? So the reason it's called Phagwa is Phagwa because it happens in Phagun.
Yes.
And it's the Purnima of Phagun is the day for the Holi. And the Purnima is the day for Holika Dahan, and the next day we celebrate with colors.
Yes.
So Phagwa is also a springtime festival. So and we love spring. Indian tradition, Hindus specifically absolutely love spring. So we have a lot of spring traditions. It starts with Basant Panchami, and going forward we have Shivratri in the spring. Then we have even Ugadi or the Chaitra Navratri is coming up, and we will continue to celebrate this until the Ram Navami.
Yes.
So this entire season is a very joyous, very beautiful time. Another interesting part is that Holi is around the time when the wheat crops have matured.
Yes.
So we're not harvesting yet, but they've matured. So there's not a lot to do in the fields. So you have this free time, which is then celebrated as Phagwa. So there is also, if you look at I described the Banjara tribes in the many shades of Holi. In the Banjara tribes, they have this beautiful sort of like a mela. I mean, for lack of a better word, it's like a gathering where a lot of people get together and they celebrate. And so what they do is Banjaras are mostly a nomadic tribe. So what happens is that the younger boys of the Banjara tribe are selected as Geria. And they will literally go house to house reminding people that it is Holi.
Yeah.
And they will sing and dance in a very, in a very joyous, boisterous way. They will be drinking, and merrymaking will continue the whole night. Then at least one man from every house will take a garland of cow dung cakes and place it on the holy pyre. Right? After that, the chief of the tribe, called the Nayak, he will command the lighting of the holy. And this is Holi is considered a symbol of the demon, which is back to the Holika story, which we will talk about in a little bit. Then there's also other elements, again, of very indigenous traditions. Anybody who has studied some indigenous traditions would recognize the similarities right away. There is ancestor worship, which we call Pitra Puja. Now, again, a lot of people who do not understand, Sanskrit and its the usages translate that into Father Puja. That is not correct. Pitra should be translated as ancestor.
Ancestor, yeah.
So there's ancestor worship in the early morning. Then men folk will come back to the homes, and in the evening, women folk will produce beautiful sweetmeats. They will create kheer, like they will make kheer. They will make coconut-based candies and stuff, and then they will pour a little bit of it in the fire as an offering. And then they will make an ululating sound.
Yeah.
And then they will sing songs for the rest of the day and play with colors nowadays. So all of these can tell you that this is so, it is not organized at all. This is
Yeah.
literally a community of people coming together.
Because
in
you're
a-
describing like cultures and you're describing tribes that are not in any way associated to the quote unquote Brahminical class, but they've been celebrating, Holi and Phagua and this time of the year as long as they can remember.
Yes. So if you were to imagine, first of all, Hinduism is not an organized religion like
Right.
Christianity and Islam. So even if you were to imagine Hinduism as such, which is what they call Brahminism, which I do not subscribe to that theory at all, even then they are completely overlooking these extremely subaltern traditions because they're trying to, force fit the narrative that doesn't exist. For
Yeah.
instance, another example I could pull up from the Bhil tribe, right? The Bhil tribe has an 8-day long celebration.
Wow.
They organize a giant mela. And again, Bhil tribe is a nomadic tribe, so they come back. The Holi, if you talk to them, they'll tell you it's like Holi is like Diwali for us
Yeah.
because it's that big. So every single person from that tribe will try to come back to their village. Then they will participate in this giant fair called Bhagoria. And the Bhagoria festival is mostly interesting to the youth because that is the place there where they pick their prospective partners.
Right.
So they actually just randomly look at people, choose a partner, propose to each other, and they elope.
Right.
Then the families actually search for them, and then the match is finally, finalized. But during that time, when the fair is happening, there's a lot of celebration. It's like huge. Thousands of people gather in those melas. They apply gulal or red powder, and in fact, the matchmaking, the how should I say, the mating ritual or the pre-mating ritual is literally based on the color. So if
Right.
the man likes or the one person likes the other person, the boy would reach to the girl and if the girl likes him, she will spare red powder on his like
Right.
smear red powder on her face. If he likes her back, he will do that too. And if they don't like each other, then they'll just go different ways and find somebody else.
Right.
And it's like this is how is possibly could this be any sort of any equal, right? This
Right.
is extremely the nature of this behavior is very community-ish, which is very typical for most indigenous traditions. They are not formal. There are rituals, there are things people do and believe in, but there are things that are sacred, and then there are things that it's just letting go, sort of the element that is here.
Yeah.
Then so this is like a lot of people completely ignore these traditions and the similarities between indigenous cultures, and they kind of try to force with this narrative that Holi is evil because they have this Brahminical story about Holika and
Yeah, let's talk about that story a little bit because all of a sudden I'm seeing like I showed people in the beginning as well of these people that are talking about Holi against Hindutva. They're saying, oh, don't celebrate Holi because it's a Brahmanical construct. You've
yes.
already shown us why it's not. And secondly, the other thing they say is that we should not be celebrating Holi because a poor Dalit woman was harmed in the entire story. So talk us through a little bit about where this story comes from, that the sister of Hiranyakashipu is now a Dalit woman.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for asking that. So
Sure.
I have gotten again into the article. I've written most of the stuff. Any other references, if people need, I would be happy to provide them. But basically, the entire story comes from Srimad Bhagavatam,
Hmm.
also known as Bhagavad Purana. And that is a beautiful story. It has many stories about basically the Srimad Bhagavatam goes through all the Dasa avatars, all the 10 avatars of Vishnu, and the Prahlada story is a small part of that. But basically, the story goes this way that there are two demons, and I don't like the word demon, but unfortunately we're talking in English, so
Sure.
yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But they are described as daityas. There are two daityas, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. So Hiranyaksha has his own escapades and he has his own story. We won't get into that. But after his death, Hiranyakashipu is very angry and confused at the death of his brother. So he goes into this very, very, very long and deep penance or which we understand as tapasya, and meditation. And he prays to Lord Brahma for a very long time. As a result, like impressed by his penance, Brahma agrees to give him a boon, and the boon he asks for is that he may not be killed by any man or animal. He may not be killed during the day or the night. He may not be killed by inside or outside. And there are several situations that he creates that would ensure that he cannot be killed at all. So he was trying to be smart, right? So he said, "Oh, sorry, I found the quote." So
Right.
it's neither at home nor outside, neither during the day nor
Yes.
at night, neither from any known weapon nor by anything, neither on the ground or in the sky, nor by any human being or animal. So he knows he can't ask for immortality straight
Right.
away. So what he can do is he tries to be clever, and he plays with these words, and he says that, okay, if nobody can kill me, then I would, like, maybe immortal.
Right.
And now, obviously, because of these conditions, what can kill him? Neither a human being nor animal can kill him, or nothing like that. So he is now convinced of his invincibility. Now, if you notice here, it is not this person is praying to the same Vedic gods, right? So he is not subaltern. He's not some other follower of some other religion, and he's praying
Right.
to, because if that was the case, he would be following, the tenets of that religion, which is also another theory that the subalternists propagate, that there was a different religion and Vedic religion was imposed upon this. So
Right.
here Hiranyakashipu is praying to Lord Brahma. Now, what you do with the boon is what makes you a devata versus a demon.
Yes.
Because now that he has the invincibility boon, instead of using it for good, he decides that he is now invincible, and so he becomes full of ego, greed, and jealousy, and he declares in his kingdom. By the way, he conquers all kingdoms, literally all three realms, and he is like the sole ruler, and he starts ruling with a lot of tyranny. And one of the things that he imposes upon his people is that they may not worship anybody else except him. He is the one true God.
Right.
So technically, he was the first monotheist. So he comes, he declares, and this is final, and nobody can question him. So all his subjects are reeling under this persecution, and because nobody can harm him, he's not scared of anyone. So like even God's wrath is not something that he's scared of. So even though all of this is happening, Hiranyakashipu's own son Prahlada, he ignores his father's egomaniacal diktats. And there's a backstory as to how he happened to end up being the devotee of Vishnu. But he is a very big devotee of Vishnu, and he would not take anybody's diktats at all.
Right.
So now his own son is defying him, right? So he's really upset. And so first he tries to dissuade him by sending him to school to brainwash him. That doesn't work. In fact, he actually wins the debate with the teachers over there. He wins the philosophical debate. So he comes back. The teachers are very, apologetic, because like, sorry, we couldn't fix it. Instead, he convinced us that he was right. And so now he's becoming really upset. Hiranyakashipu is even more angry.
Right.
Then this fellow, he goes and starts teaching other boys the greatness of Mahavishnu. That is even more, making him even more angry. So eventually, after all the measures have been exhausted, Hiranyakashipu decides that this son should be killed.
Right.
So he literally unleashes all his warriors upon this guy, all of whom also have their own very fearsome boons. So very, very angry demons are going at him, and then nothing happens. So again, Srimad Bhagavatam here says he tries to crush him with an elephant, attack him with huge snakes, cast spells of doom, throw him from heights, to conjure tricks, imprison him, administer poison, and subject him to starvation, cold, wind, fire, and water, and pile rocks upon him. But by none of these means the demon succeeded in putting his son, the sinless one, to death. With his prolonged efforts having no success, he started getting very nervous. So now, in these plethora of ways that he tries to kill his own son, who is of no fault except that he worships a different god. So talk about religious persecution, right? So this fellow, he enlists his sister Holika to help him kill his own son. So the sister herself also has another boon. She has also done penance again to the same gods, Hindu gods, and she has this cloak of sorts that will protect the wearer from being burned by fire. So she, lures her young nephew, who's by some estimates only 10 years old.
Right.
She lures her young nephew and sits on a fire and lights it up. Now, as the fire starts raging, the wind blows the cloak from Holika to Prahlada, and instead of Prahlada being burned, Holika gets burned.
Right.
And so the idea is that by the blessing of Lord Vishnu and his faith in it, Prahlada was saved from the evil aunt who was trying to burn the child, right? So now, first of all, let us understand this. Hiranyakashipu, Holika, and Prahlada are the same family. Right, so whatever is the caste is also all three of them. Yes. So if all the caste, if this was caste demonization, Prahlada would be also whatever caste his father was.
Right.
Now let's dig into what is the supposed caste of Holika.
Yeah.
So again, Srimad Bhagavatam comes to the rescue, because Srimad Bhagavatam, as I said, is a long story about all the avatars. So it goes into great detail about the origins of Hiranyakashipu and his brother Hiranyaksha. And turns out that they are the sons of Kashyapa Rishi. And Kashyapa Rishi is one of the Sapta Rishis that have fathered all Brahmin clans in the world. Not just Brahmin, actually all of us have the Gotra. But specifically, if again we're sticking to Brahminism theory and assuming that only Brahmins were born, have those lineages and we don't have them, then Kashyapa Rishi is literally the father of at least 1/7 of all Brahmins, but it's actually not even equally distributed. So he's one of the biggest sages of Brahmins ever was. So so unless we're saying that all Brahmins came from a Dalit, I don't know what's going on. How could possibly sage Kashyapa be anything else? So assume that Kashyapa Rishi is Brahmin. Then Hiranyakashipu is the son from his second wife, Diti. He had two wives, Aditi and Diti. Right. And Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha are two of Diti's sons. So he is directly related to Kashyapa Rishi. And Kashyapa Rishi himself is the grandson of Brahma. So Lord Brahma, he is from the Hiranyakashipu is the great grandson of Brahma, the son of sage Kashyapa. And therefore, by all possible imaginations, he can only be one thing, which is Brahmin. Holika being his sister,
right?
Therefore, also a Brahmin woman. So I do not know how did she become Dalit?
So where is this coming from? Like, why do you have, ostensibly educated students when they're posting about Holi against Hindutva, saying that this poor Dalit woman was murdered by these evil Brahmins? Like, where is this story emerging from?
Yes, so I dug into this. It looks like the origin of there are two pieces that happened in the last 2 years. One came from feminism in India, the other came from Equality Labs. Both of them have a very very obvious history of Hindu phobia. But we won't get into those because they have these biased perspectives that they're always presenting, and it's always around festivals. Feminism in India specifically is attacking most of the festivals under behind feminism argument, and a lot of times the arguments are not even feminist.
Well, it is not, because I've seen that I think people are aware of feminism by India only because of their hypocrisies.
Yes.
They'll say that, don't put the ghungat on a Hindu woman, and that's Brahmanical patriarchy. But at the same time, they'll go around saying, look how beautiful this woman looks in her hijab.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's very hard to take
these are all passe ideas. There used to be a time when only the white imaginations of feminism existed, where you had to leave your culture and tradition in order to be a feminist. That is no longer the case, and the best example for that is the Muslim feminists. Right? I am completely supportive of their choice to wear a hijab. Why shouldn't they? Why should it be a situation where they have to choose between their culture and religion and their rights? That is just a ridiculous argument. And now the same argument is being applied to to Hindus, right? Like, in order to be a feminist, you have to abandon your Mangal Sutra, your Sindoor, you have to abandon all the cultural traditions that existed. You have to, abuse your gods, and only then will you actually be feminist. This is ridiculous,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I'm actually, on this note, I'm the founder of a nonprofit called Shaktitva Foundation.
Well, I was going to ask you because we actually had a super chat from Sri Hari as well. She said, "Thanks to you both for doing this." Sham, please ask Neha about Shaktitva. So there we go.
Thank you so much. So yeah, Shaktitva is actually a nonprofit that was founded in the very principle that Hindu women do not need to abandon their religion and their culture in order to be feminist. Because feminism, if you ignore the permeating narratives, feminism essentially is about women and their rights and their issues. So the way, and to bring that onto the fore in front of the power structures, and this is not the only. It is not necessary that the only way to do feminism is through Marxism. It does not have to be a violent revolution. It does not have to overthrow societies. And again, once again, the beautiful example is from Muslim feminists that we have seen. But there are several other. There is womanism from Africa that is doing the same exact thing. There is indigenous feminism that is emerging, that is beautiful. Like Native American tribes are talking about how they were feminists long before Christianity even arrived. And one of the primary reasons, in my opinion, for Hinduism is the vast and beautiful tradition of goddess worship, which we understand as the source of all power. The word for power in Hindu terminology is Shakti, and Shakti is also the name of the supreme goddess,
Right.
the divine mother. So
Right.
from there, we do not need to be empowered, because we are Shakti ourselves. How can you possibly empower Shakti? So that is the idea behind Shaktitva, and it seeks, like, Shaktitva essentially, if you the etymology would be the state of being Shakti. So essentially, the foundation's work is to sponsor research, outreach, as well as advocacy in terms of specifically these narratives, which is why I took up Holi, because it's very important to understand that feminism is often used as a tool to attack cultures and religions, especially when people don't understand them. And there's also a lot of colonial bias,
Right.
where this white feminism looks at indigenous societies and tries to tell them that the only way that these white women are here to save us,
Right.
from brown men. There was a very ridiculous.
Well, it's also funny because it's so entirely unoriginal. These criticisms are completely. It's like if they were in school, they basically copied the homework of the Western feminists and they just changed a few words.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is.
Even today, actually, now you're seeing two parallel movements emerge. There is also this white yoga syndrome, where I saw a very infuriating documentary. I think it was called The Yoga Woman,
Yeah.
where the basic premise was that these white women have actually saved yoga, because white colonialists always save things from other barbarians. So they have saved this beautiful yoga from evil Hindu men, and therefore we should all be thankful to them and bow in obeisance. So
Right.
this is cultural appropriation gone wild.
Yeah.
So you see these two threads emerging. One which is supported from Indian academia, which is big based on Hinduphobia, which is now being appropriated into the Western sphere. And it is supporting the thesis of these white feminists,
Right.
because they're out to save us. So we have to declutter this, and
Yes.
and the most important thing is that we have to look at, if you're talking about feminism, you have to look at what the women are saying. And that is, again, and most importantly, the subaltern women are saying.
Right.
There was, and the best example for that was Sabrimala, right? You had these elitist 5 or 6 people who saw a Barkadat article and decided to sue us in court, Again, the subalterns, half of the time we don't even know what's happening in the upper echelons of the
Yeah.
power structure, so we did not know what was going on. By the time we actually so the temple management fought against it, but by that time the narrative was made that it was women versus the temple. What people completely and Western media completely blacked out was there was literally millions of women on the streets fighting for the tradition.
Right.
And even when once or twice Padma Pillai managed to go to a she was invited to a studio, people literally told her to her face that you have internalized patriarchy.
Yeah.
That's how stupid it is, right? Anything we say that does not conform to your narrative is internalized patriarchy.
Well, that's what's happening with people that are saying, like, no, now you have this other movement that came around in opposition to the sort of Holi against Hindutva movement, is Holi for Unity.
Yes.
All those Holi for all the any woman that is associated with Holi for Unity has automatically internalized Brahmanical patriarchy.
Oh,
So
not just
even
that.
that phrase
Yes.
is like lifted from like Western feminist literature. Even
And
that's not original.
yes, and I would like to point out this very important fact, which is that Holi against Hindutva and Holi for unity, just the two concepts, right? Now, let us forget all this background here. Just for a moment, analyze two phrases. When you're saying Holi against Hindutva, what are you essentially doing? You're adding a negative connotation to a festival celebrated by literally almost a billion people,
Right.
to because they are somehow now they have the burden of decrying this imaginary Hindutva. Even
Right.
let's assume that even if Hindutva is real and whatever they're saying is real, why should the entire majority of Hindus be burdened to not celebrate their own festival because they have to decry this? If the same thing was when the same thing was done to Muslims, it was correctly called out as Islamophobia, then
Right.
why is this not Hinduphobia?
Right.
Why does every Hindu have to decry Hindutva while celebrating Holi? It's like, it's like an unnecessary burden of guilt.
Well, it's like that's the thing, right? It's like if you go to a Indian restaurant to eat food, with every bite, you're basically saying, "I hate Hindus, but the food is good. I
Yes,
want to make sure that I hate Hindus, but I just like the food." It's like
yes,
doing that.
exactly.
So you
No,
can't celebrate a festival without having to abuse Hindus.
yes, but why is it that Hindus need to carry this burden, even if, let's assume, if all of this politics is happening? Surely you're not saying that all Hindus are Hindutva. And
Right.
if you are saying that, then why are you coining a new word? Why don't you just say Holi against Hindus?
Right.
Then that would be it, right? Then why?
Well, it's funny, right? Because it's there are so many echoes of this, like uh, with Bernie's campaign, we saw there's a bunch of people involved with this campaign who are like, they say we're against Zionism. They say
Yes.
we're against Zionism. We hate Zionism. We love the Jews. We love the Jews, but we hate Zionism.
But we
But
won't
it's
let
not
you
really
celebrate Passover
Zionism.
unless you actually condemn
Yeah.
Zionism. So you
Unless
have to
you
be
basically say, unless you're a Jew who says Israel doesn't have the right to exist, you're a Zionist.
yes.
So the standards for Zionism are also very high.
This is one step further than that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just the political opinions that you're targeting now.
Yeah.
Now what you're saying is Passover against Zionism,
That's
right?
what it is. Yeah.
So
That's
let's
what
also say, Christmas against colonialism. Let's
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But none of that happens, right? Because that is correctly begotten. Why should
But
every
they hate Christmas as well. The only thing that they don't hate is like Eid. Eid is beautiful. Hijab Day is wonderful.
so then
That's
what?
what they are.
So then Eid against terrorism, right?
Exactly.
And that is bigoted, by the way. That is correctly bigoted. And when you saw the same movement happen in Europe, where we saw that every random Muslim was stopped and asked to condemn terrorism, that was correctly, appropriately called ridiculous. So
Right.
why is suddenly now Holi against Hindutva not equally ridiculous? Now,
Right.
actually, Ilhan Omar has spoken about this at length, and she actually yelled at everybody for repeatedly asking her for condemning this or that was happening in the Muslim world. But somehow that is okay, and we understand that point and appreciate that point when it's made in the context of Islam. But the
Yeah.
same exact point is not understood when it comes to Hindus. So
Yeah.
that is why Holi against Hindutva is fundamentally a bigoted concept.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that they are touting as a counter campaign which is Holi for unity, it was not a counter campaign. It was simply returning the positive connotation back to Holi. right? Holi does not stand for this politics or that politics. Holi is a subaltern festival where people literally even forget their personal enmities. In fact, the Holi Milan is considered one of those times of the year when you go to the houses of your friends and family that you haven't had a chance to see for a long time.
Right.
All past, anger and issues are forgotten, and this is the time for celebration and the sense of community spirit. So that is what Holy for Unity signified. That
Mm.
is why the term was net positive. And
Mm.
it was, the attempt was not about, not to get into the politics of Holi at all, or
Mm.
sorry, the politics of Hindutva at all, or what is happening in India, but to just simply assert the fact that Holi itself should not be attached to political campaigns.
Yeah.
And yet, in many campuses, it was actually not allowed because it was considered as a counter campaign.
Yeah, it sounds like what they're doing is that they're using Holi. They're saying if you celebrate Holi, then you basically agree with everything that Modi and the BJP does. That's
Yes,
what they're
yes.
linking it to.
And
It's like us.
which
Sorry.
is actually very interesting, because if you notice that all the senators and all the politicians that they're going after, and by they I mean the anti-Hindutva
Yeah.
people. There's also a students against Hindutva thingy.
Yes.
I think that's
They're the
happening.
ones that I think started the whole Holi
Yeah,
against.
yeah. So if you notice all the other things that Equality Lab and Students Against Hindutva are doing, it is actually also only targeting Democrats. It is targeting Hindu Democrats,
Yeah.
right? So what essentially
Yeah.
is happening is that if you are a Democrat Hindu, you must bear the guilt and the burden of what is
Yeah.
happening in India. And if that is not xenophobia, I really don't know what is.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is, and you're seeing kind of results of that as well. Where there was a tweet out by the founder, one of the co-founders of the Hindu American Foundation. She was talking about how the sort of the Indian American vote, even though it's sticking with the Democrats, but it's consolidating around somebody like Joe Biden rather than somebody like Bernie Sanders, who really sort of encourages these kinds of people, these kinds of Holi against Hindutva type folk. Their champion is Bernie Sanders. Their champion isn't Joe Biden. They hate Joe Biden because Joe Biden believes in, compromise. Joe Biden believes in like agreeing with people and working with a broad cross section of people. Whatever you may think of Joe Biden, but you're seeing that. You're seeing that. I don't know how tangible this is at the end of the day, but you're seeing a certain amount of like disgust in the Indian Americans as well, where they're saying, "All right, we're getting a little sick and tired."
Yes.
Of being told that everything about our culture is disgusting and horrible, and we should be shunned.
Yes.
So, and that's what is going to happen.
Honestly, being left no choice, because what is happening is Hindu Americans specifically, look, Hinduism at the end of the day, and the same thing you can see in India. India is a socialist country, right? Modi is actually far left of the leftist person in US.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the entire American population does not understand the simple concept. The left and right in India are literally like poles apart.
Yeah.
If you were to put them on a line, on a number,
you take out the person from the policies, and you'll be like, "Is this Modi or Bernie?" I can't tell.
No. Actually, Modi is much more advanced than Bernie. No, but I'm being honest, because if you look at it, Modi has not only Medicare for all or the Ayushman Bharat policy that was revealed was actually the version of Medicare for all that India could afford. But we also have things. We also have policies that provide universal basic income to the lower populations. We have free food through the rationing system. We have a lot of public subsidies some are state specific, some are nationally implemented. The only difference between Modi's policies and any other socialist government's policies is that he also is fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
So he doesn't just impose a policy if he's because he has to. He also makes sure that he can pay for it. Right. So that fiscal responsibility is possibly the only thing that would differentiate him from other Indian socialist politicians. Right. But even so, all of the right, including if you look at RSS commentary on social policies, it is very socialist. Very, very socialist. In fact, some of the things are so socialist, you would be shocked to hear them, right? Even those are considered far right RSS.
Yep.
because we say, okay, this guy is, I don't even know what he's talking about. We weren't even talking about, completely eliminating income tax.
Right.
If you remember during the campaign, in the 2014 campaign, there was a very big proposal that garnered a lot of weight, which is about we should eliminate income tax and we
Right.
should sustain ourselves completely on the other forms of taxes. So again, this, first of all, this entire left right business is completely screwed up. People do not have that understanding, and what is happening is now that people are trying to tell you that Modi was friends with Obama, he's also friends with Trump. How can you possibly expect that India is going to, not entertain the president that you elected,
Yeah.
right? If you don't like Trump, go not elect him.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's as simple as that. You cannot ask India and a population of 1 billion people who are aspirational, who are trying to rise up
Yeah.
the world ladder, to shun a leader because you don't like him.
It's also funny because it's the same people that are saying that the United States should be developing a better relationship with North Korea and China. They should be talking to China. You should be talking to them.
You should be
Why are
talking
you
to
doing a trade
Turkey.
war? Why are you fighting with them?
Don't forget
Yeah.
Turkey.
Yeah.
Another,
Yeah.
according
Talk to Erdogan. Develop a relationship with Erdogan. Peace, not war, man. All that stuff.
but at the same time, you should abuse
Yeah.
Modi.
No, don't talk to Modi. Yeah.
Yeah, and the hilarious thing is that you expect Modi to not look at the interest of his nation because you disagree with the policies of your own president. That's your problem, not Modi's problem. Now, second thing, another important thing to understand, Modi was just as good friends with Obama.
Yeah.
They had very good time together. They had a personal repo.
I
And
wrote a testimonial for Modi in Time magazine.
yes.
Yeah.
And they had a joint article in New York Times, I think, if I remember correctly. And Modi was one of the biggest supporters of the Paris Accord.
Right.
When Obama was there, and Obama and him also had such the equally strong friendship, but nobody called Obama a fascist. Like, why is Obama not a fascist for hanging out with Modi? But suddenly, all these Hindu Americans who are Democrats, who vote Democrat, should now bear the burden because Trump is being friends with Modi.
Right.
Like, all of this, if you look at it at a higher level, this is only open and plain bigotry, because they're not going after Hindu Republicans. They're going after Hindu Democrats.
Yes.
They're going after Amit Jani because they found a photo of him with Modi without giving him a chance to explain why he is a Democrat and also likes Modi.
Right.
Right? The die has been cast. The judgment has been issued that he is a fascist, and so he must be fired, and his livelihood and his politics must be destroyed.
Yeah.
The next person I think is they're going after is Rajeshwari, who's running from Queens. I
Okay.
saw that campaign yesterday. And another important point to highlight here is that there was a post, I think you highlighted on your last show, where they actually calling out for boycott of all Hindu candidates.
Yes.
And union of on anti-fascist people to
Yes.
boycott all Hindu candidates. So the masks are falling, right?
Like, imagine that. Imagine anybody in America saying boycott all Muslim candidates. Imagine the absolute shitstorm that's going to rain on that person if they said something like that. Imagine even the shitstorm that's going to raise on a person if they say don't vote for any Jewish candidates. But for Hindu candidates, it's fine because, screw
But
them.
they could get away with saying don't vote for any Jewish candidate
Yeah.
for a very long time in America.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not forget history, right? Anti-Semitism was very popularly supported by partisan.
I mean, today you have people that are involved with Council of American Islamic Relations. There are people that are involved with Bernie's campaign that are saying that, Israel doesn't have the right to exist. You had a couple of days ago, you had Rashida Tlaib, the very, progressive congresswoman from Michigan. She was wearing a T-shirt. She was promoting Linda Sarsour's book, and she was wearing a T-shirt where the T-shirt was basically, it was Palestine without Israel. So it was basically just entire Palestine with Israel completely missing.
Yes.
You have people that are openly supporting and promoting the idea of obliterating Israel. They don't get asked questions. All right, what do you mean when you say Israel doesn't have the right to exist? What are we going to do with all the Jews that live in Israel right now? They don't ask them that question, but with Hindus, everything is fair game. So the point is that we're not asking, the point isn't that don't criticize Hindus. Absolutely criticize Hindus. They're deserving of criticism as much as any other person. Go for it. What I'm saying is show some consistency. That's what people are asking for.
It's not even the consistency. This would be bigotry in any for any other culture. This is bigotry for Hindus. And if you're supporting it, you're essentially saying that Hindus cannot vote Democrat anymore unless they start thinking about they stop thinking about national interests of India, or they start having a nuanced opinion about their country back home, even though they have a lot more information than you will ever have. About the country. You're not giving them a chance to speak up. You're not giving them a chance to, counter your judgment. It is like, basically you're hanging him on a national square. This is like witch burning trials all over again. And of course, it doesn't help that we're polytheists. So that, we are in a way witches.
Exactly. I mean, we get hate from like every section.
All sections. There is xenophobia. There is, religious supremacy that happens. There is, race relations. There is colonialism. All aspects. We are completely, downcast. And unfortunate thing is that our own leaders are betraying us in this matter. Like look at what Ro Khanna and Pramila Jayapal did. Like it was ridiculous to see them spreading so much misinformation. In fact,
the disgusting part really to me was when Ro Khanna shared that article, that horrendous article written by this homophobe Christian supremacist that was making the allegation that Tulsi Gabbard's a fascist because some of her donors have Hindu-sounding names.
Yes, Intercept article.
Yes. No, it was that Caravan article. Then Intercept picked it up as well.
Oh, gotcha.
There was that Caravan article, which was absolute, like the most intense garbage that I've seen. But it's published in a quote-unquote reputable magazine, and it's being shared by a top Indian origin Democratic leader like Ro Khanna. I mean, like, I understand that you don't like Tulsi, but come on, man, like vet the articles that you're sharing. At least he said, "Oh, I didn't know. I just thought I was talking about religious pluralism." No, you're not. If you read the article even a little bit, you would know what the hell that article is.
He has Hindu-sounding names, and I'm pretty sure he has a lot of donors with Hindu-sounding names.
Hindu-sounding names, exactly.
That should change.
Yeah, exactly.
That should change. Maybe Hindu-sounding names should not go with people who hate Hindu-sounding names.
Yeah, like imagine if Bernie has Muslim supporters and people said, well, he must be getting funding from Al-Qaeda because he has Muslim-sounding names. Like imagine that kind of shit.
Yes.
It's insanity.
It is absolute insanity. And what does it... So like one more point I would highlight here. Look, Modi has 30% vote share in India, right? This was only in the Lok Sabha elections. We're not even counting the aggregate of the state elections.
Right.
That would probably be much higher because a lot of people vote for Modi in the center, but do not vote for Modi in the state, or vice versa. People make nuanced decisions. Now here you have 30% of Indian population of eligible voters, which is 900 million people. 30% of 900 million people is a ridiculously high number. And that is actually 30% of 900 million people is close to the entire population of the United States.
Right.
So that number of people voted for Modi, right? So if you look at Hindu Americans, especially the first and second generation immigrants, you would almost always have some connection to somebody who voted Modi.
Right.
It is numerically impossible to not have that. Even if you disagree with his politics, it is entirely possible your parents voted for him, your grandparents voted for him, your uncles, your cousins voted for him. And it does not matter what your personal politics is. If you were to start labeling people just because of their random ass connections with Modi, you would most certainly find it for every single Hindu that exists on this planet.
Right.
Well, numerically, it's not possible to not have it, right?
The other funny thing was that, like, whenever Modi comes to America, he gets this massive crowds. He's able to generate these massive crowds, and I can bet you good money that a majority of those crowds, if they are actually American citizens, they are Democrats.
Yes.
A majority of that crowd that he's generating are Democrats. Yes. So when you're abusing anybody who has an interest in Modi or who likes Modi or who supports Modi, you're essentially abusing your own voter base. You're telling your own voter base that you're fascist and you're horrible.
The same thing that happened with Labour Party in UK. Completely ignored the Hindu phobia that was emanating from from their cadre, that was going around during the UK elections. And a lot of this is because a lot of these South Asian organizations in both UK and US are actually run by Pakistani people, and they, intense hatred of Pakistan for India and Hindus is not new. So,
Right.
and also Bangladeshi people,
Right.
and all of that is actually force feeding into this narrative. And by overlooking that people are dragging their own regional enmities and their own biases into your politics and using your own platform to spread Hindu phobia, is exactly the reason why Hindu UK British voters decided to make a substantive shift to the
Right.
Conservative Party, even if they're not conservative, because that was like a lesson learned.
Yes.
And hopefully the lesson was learned because Jeremy resigned. But I don't know if that has been a significant shift. But really do not understand what kind of strategy is this, right? Like, what is going on? Do you not want votes? Like, it's like, are Hindu votes like
I mean,
half
that's what
of other
it is
people?
funny. It is funny that you're right in that sense, because I've seen over the past couple of weeks, you've had these female candidates come out and say, you had Elizabeth Warren, when she dropped out, she came and gave an interview where she said that women, you're basically saying that America isn't ready for a woman president. And when you're saying that, you're not saying that to Republicans, because Republicans aren't the ones voting for you or not voting for you. You're saying that to the Democratic women in Massachusetts, because Democratic women in Massachusetts, your own home state, went and voted for Joe Biden over
Yeah,
you. So are
yeah.
you saying that all of those women, who are Democrats, by the way, they internalize the white patriarchy? Is that what you're basically saying?
That
That's
is
the
actually
same thing that Kamala Harris also said. She said
that
that
is
America is not ready for
actually
a woman of color president.
very, very, very good point that you raise. And this kind of goes back into our feminism argument,
Yeah.
because we say that you have a choice now, but truly really don't have a choice, because we fought for suffrage so you could have the right to vote, but we will take away your right to vote, or we will not consider you as a good voter because you voted for the people we did not choose.
Exactly.
So if previously we did not even have a vote because we were considered not worthy of voting, now we cannot make our independent choices. In
Right.
fact, there was and this has been going on both in India also. By the way, in India there was this hideous article written during 2014 campaign, which profiled four prominent Modi supporter women, and it profiled them, like in the sense that it
Right.
talked to them. It was an interview of sorts, and the conclusion or the insinuation that the reporter tried to draw was that these women decided to vote for Modi because they were sexually attracted to him.
Right.
Because what other reason could a woman
What,
possibly have, right? Like, it's not like we have
right.
brains and stuff.
What other reason could people vote for Modi other than his incredible sexual charisma? Right.
But the women, that's all they think about. And so if
Yeah.
you look at a macho man like that, it's very hard to like not follow her.
Yeah. It's
That's
insanity, man. And the
not-
other thing also is that I remember when what's her name? Smriti Irani was first made a cabinet minister, and the way people went after her, she said, "Oh, Moti auntie," on all of that stuff.
Anti-national was the
Uh-huh.
headline for the Telegraph. I
Yep.
mean, how misogynistic do you have to be? And
Like,
I'm pretty
imagine.
sure the entire editorial team, composed of a lot of men, would be putting feminist in their bios.
Yep.
The same men who would not blink an eye before making a sexist attack on a woman.
Yep.
The same thing happens to activists. My friend Anjali George, she
Yes.
has been abused in ways that you cannot possibly imagine.
I've seen, she's shared tweets, and it's horrendous.
It's horrendous. The kind of abuse I get is like,
Yeah.
it's very, very, it's like, body, anything they can go with: body shaming, questioning, why are you abroad? If you're abroad, you're a traitor. Oh, what does that even mean?
Exactly.
All of those arguments are made, and you must not be well read. I have even had, like, your BJP husband might beat you.
Oh my.
I was like, what is a BJP husband?
Yeah.
So all of this
You buy him at the BJP online store? Is that where you buy him? Yeah.
yes. But these are the kind of ridiculous things that are given a free pass But this is not trolling. This is not considered trolling. This is
Yeah.
accepted trolling.
Yeah.
Because if you're going after a woman that you disagree with, trolling her in a sexist, misogynist ways is absolutely fine, and we are not going
Because
to
they're fascists, Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So this kind of hate is the reason that a lot of people are getting very, very disillusioned
Yeah.
with the and there are scholars who are working to bring nuance to help people understand our points of views. But what we're being told is no, don't get a right to speak because we're not going to listen to you.
Yeah.
And so there's no possible way you can explain to them why is it possible for you to be a Sanders fan and a Modi fan together. It's not possible.
Yeah.
End of story. Not possible. So you must be fired, you must be ignored or burnt or whatever. And so eventually people are going to use the only power they have in their hands, which is votes.
Yes.
Right? And you're forcing people to make a choice that they do not want to make.
Yeah.
They want to vote on domestic issues. You're forcing them to vote on Indian politics.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
It is absolutely ridiculous. And I feel like people have been trained over the past decade to sort of think in binaries. Whereas if you are a person who likes their indigenous civilization, that means that, or let's say if you're like a quote unquote right winger, which, there are no proper right wingers in India, but still, if you're like a quote unquote right winger, that must mean that you're anti-abortion. That must mean that you're anti-LGBTQ rights. That must mean that you're anti-minority rights. That must mean that you want to create a Hindu Rashtra and kick all the Muslims out. So that's the binaries that we exist in. So if you say I like Modi, that means you believe in these things as well. You can't be like, I like Modi, but I also support abortion rights, but I also support LGBTQ rights, but I also believe that Hindus are as much of an intrinsic part of Indian culture as Muslims are.
By the way, Modi has zero views on all of these topics that you
yeah.
He has
Exactly.
zero public views on this matter. In fact, his own party has often, like leaders from his own party have expressed very kind of differing views on these matters.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have shown incredible maturity in coming around and understanding the politics of the day and the need of the hour. Because at the end of the day, it's all about developing an understanding of the people and what they need most.
Yeah.
And these debates are important to have.
Yes.
In fact, this is one of the things that I would like to highlight. When I started Shaktitva, I did not want to completely ignore the opposing voices. In fact, I wanted to understand them. So what was the first book that I bought?
Right.
It was Manusmriti.
Okay.
I had no copies. None of my family has ever read it. But I bought Manusmriti. It's written right here.
Right. I see it.
It's right here because I needed to understand what they were saying. Because we cannot have a true understanding of our politics or even what we stand for without truly acknowledging the criticisms that are in place, right?
Yes.
And then trying to understand them. This has to be a scholarly effort. It cannot be a my way or highway approach because first of all, that is not the Hindu ethos at all.
Right.
We believe in debate and we believe in growth. And so if there is things to improve, which I'm sure there are, we will find out ways to doing that. But surely there is a possibility of doing that without abandoning Hinduism in its entirety. And I won't dwell a lot upon the biases of Indology. I think you should get Vishwa on your show sometime.
Sure.
But one thing that Vishwa often highlights, and even Jeffrey Long has written about it, is that when is that line when you cross over from criticisms of Hindus to Hinduphobia? Right. And that line is when you start arguing, in essence, that Hinduism must be eliminated in order for its problems to be solved. Right. And a lot of Indologists have actually made that argument because they've made farcical arguments that detach everything that is good, that they think is good, about Hinduism from Hindu. So they start saying that XYZ came from Buddhism, it came from Jainism, it came from Sikhism, everything came from elsewhere. Right. Nothing came from Hindus. But only one thing is truly and truly Hindu, which is caste. and because it is evil, so therefore the only way to actually save Hindus is to eliminate casteism, which is and therefore eliminating Hinduism. Right. So you're actually asking for the entire religion to be eradicated. And we have seen how religions are eradicated. We do not want that. We've had that for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
We do not want that imposition again. So unless you give us space to express our views, to have spirited debate amongst ourselves, and you listen to the other side, what you're essentially arguing for is bigotry.
Yeah.
And unless we have an acknowledgement for that, just the argument that this is in a peer-reviewed journal versus this is in a blog is not going to cut it. It's just not, and it is an intellectually vacuous argument. It is a morally reprehensible argument.
Right.
To dismiss the views because they do not they do not form part of the, they are not part of the power structures.
Right.
So all of that but there has been tremendous scholarship on this view. For people who are interested, they must read Vishwa Adluri, they must read Arvind Sharma, they must read even understanding where the Western culture intersects with ours, whether liberalism is applicable to Hinduism or to a Hindu society or not, or to an Indian society, even to a multicultural, diverse Indian society.
Right.
People need to do that work, and that's a lot of emotional labor for us, by the way, because we've seen so much persecution. It becomes very emotionally tiring for us to constantly go against this bigotry.
Right.
Yesterday, somebody posted on my Instagram, it was a Muslim handle. They posted on my Instagram that they have machetes at home ready.
Wow.
What was that? What the post was that I had shared an example of Hinduphobia from Countercurrents, which is very Hinduphobic, like far left Hinduphobic magazine in India, which the titles read that in order to show solidarity with Muslims, Hindus must convert to Islam.
Oh my God.
I have shared a screenshot of that heading page on Instagram, and the response we got was, "We have home machetes at our home ready."
Yeah.
Another Hindu person commented, "Save Hinduism," as a hashtag, and in response to that, that's what he said.
Yeah, so it's basically you disprove Hinduphobia by displaying Hinduphobia.
Well, he was not interested in. See, there are two parts of it, right? There are one part that wants to mask their Hinduphobia in academic critiques and very sophisticated language, banking upon the ignorance of the people of their audience and exacerbating it. We saw that happen in CAA, right? There's the fact that India is giving safe place for persecuted minorities, including Hindus, in the 3 neighboring countries where persecution is a fact. Where we saw the case of Asiya Bibi recently. There 1,000 girls are abducted non-Muslim girls are abducted in Pakistan every year, according to a Christian report. And yet, these are just facts that of our neighborhood.
Yeah, and you have Sikhs that are being ethnically cleansed from Peshawar in the form of blasphemy killings.
Yes, and you saw the recent attack on the Gurudwara as well.
Yeah.
If you actually acknowledge those political realities and give safe refuge to these 6 persecuted minorities in your country, then we are going to start a disinformation campaign against you. And we are going to start proving that you're fascists. And they bank on the ignorance of others, and they bank on the fact that people are not going to go beyond New York Times to do their homework. And so therefore, whatever New York Times writes is the gospel truth. Right. We even found Wall Street Journal totally fabricating a comment from the brother of the slain Ankit Lal.
Yep.
And this is Ankit Sharma.
Ankit Sharma.
And this is ridiculous, because this would be bigotry any other place. So there was one group of people who are masking all of this in sophisticated language, and there's the other group of people who are just always been bigoted. They don't care about sophistry. They don't. You saw Sharjeel Imam's
exactly.
He
openly said, "I don't care for sophistication and masking my language in flowery tongues.
Yes,
I want to be very clear about what I want to achieve."
Yeah, in fact, you saw. I think it was what was that woman from the Rajya Sabha TV who was trying to coach Muslims in a speech in Jamia Millia University to use sophisticated language until they understand our ways.
Yes.
And she that when that speech, and she was a very sorry.
Oh, you're good.
She was a very famous reporter. I'm completely don't.
Arfa Khanum, right?
Yes,
That
yes,
lady,
yes,
yeah.
Arfa. So
She
you
said we
see
have to
that
change our strategy.
yes, that they have two groups.
Yeah,
One there is which is purely Hindu phobic hate, which
right.
is they don't care about masking stuff, and they really don't care about what you think about them.
Right,
And the other group is the one that does the sophistry and spins these arguments and
right.
goes to reputable journals. The problem is this we have been facing in the country for years now, right? You had even the Owaisi brothers, right? It's a good cop bad cop routine there.
Right.
So this guy goes and talks about elimination of Hindus, and the other guy comes and spins it.
Yeah.
So
And
that
his party member just came and said that 15 crores are
oh yeah,
heavy
yeah.
on 100 crores. Yeah.
Actually, that 1,500 crore thing was said by the
Wasim.
unsophisticated OIC also.
Oh, really?
I think it was like before Modi, like
Yeah, I
2014.
think he was saying the whole 15-minute thing, 15 minute ke liye
Yes,
police
yes,
aao and all that.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
You curb the police, and then you will see what we can do
Yeah.
to Hindus. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
So let's take a couple of questions before we wrap up today. And there's a question here for you. It says, Sham, please ask her, in her opinion, which of the two today is a bigger religious threat as far to Hinduism? Is it evangelism or Islamism? And let me add, is it liberalism?
So I honestly don't think that it is necessarily a coordinated attack. It is very sophisticated for sure, and there is a lot of people who do definitely have their own biases, which makes them write critique. And there's absolutely true that there is a philosophical conflict between the very ethos of Hinduism and the very ethos of organized monotheisms. So I think it's very hard to say which one is a bigger threat. And secondly, what we are seeing is all of these, modernism, liberalism, communism, all of these things are essentially incompatible with the Hindu ethos
Right.
of pluralism, unity, and community spirit. So it is very hard to necessarily, pinpoint and say this one is evil, go fight that, and go fight that.
Right.
I think what is more important, and what we all should do, is take it upon ourselves to do more, which is we should speak up for our traditions, try to understand why are these people, what are these people talking about us, and dispel the myth. Because as we see, tamsoma sadgameha,
Right.
tamsoma jyotirgameha. So we will have that element. If we shine the light of knowledge upon these people, we will have a much better, more informed movement. Because
Right.
you can't necessarily, think about it like as these three isms, because that what it does, it boxes people into binaries, right? A lot of Hindu Americans that we were discussing today would actually call themselves liberals.
Yes.
A lot of us would call
Yes.
ourselves liberals, right? So liberalism as a philosophy, etc., there are nuanced incompatibilities between Hinduism and liberalism. Those are very academic in nature, and if you wanted to delve deeper into it, but I think we should not be boxing people into those binaries. Actually, one of the things I would like to highlight, this is what happened with Anjali as well, right? I don't think you will find somebody who's more interested and devoted to the Hindu cause,
Right.
but because people saw her name, the George after her name, they would assume this is evangelical missionaries and whatever's, right?
Right.
Then you have people who are very, very nuanced speakers, who do understand our point of view, from all of these groups. So instead of trying to do this labeling, what we must do and what we must focus on is try to understand where people are coming from and how can we help them understand us. Because truly, what is the biggest reason why we are facing a lot of this is Hindus haven't had a chance to tell their stories, right? Contrary to this entire Brahminism claim, we have zero control over history.
Right.
We see in our history this whitewashed narrative that came from Nehruvianism. That was because people thought that if we would talk about the truth, we would, disenfranchise certain people and we would upset some people, and we don't want to do that. But that is not the way to solve civilizational
Right.
problems. If you deny that slavery ever happened, and you try to feed nonsense about to the Black American population, you would see that latent anger within them, and you will almost always unification and peace would never come across. So the
Right.
first step, and the same thing applies with Native Americans. If you keep denying that you took over their lands and you mass genocided their populations, then you would never accomplish any sort of peace, because there would be this latent anger. And
Yes.
that is what has happened to Hindus. Suddenly, after independence, there is this narrative that Hindus form the majority, and everything that comes with an assumption of the majority,
Yeah.
which is that you are oppressive, you have had power structures, you have been entrenched in the policy making world, and you have imposed your ways upon the others, is exactly the opposite of true.
Right.
Because if there's any country in the world where you can compare India to, the Indian situation to, it's South Africa,
Yes. I was
right?
just thinking that. Yeah.
And if South Africa has majority blacks, does that mean that blacks ought to
Have
always
all the
have
power.
power structure? Does that mean that they created all the policies and therefore all the inequities are the fault of the black population? It would be ridiculous.
Yes.
But that's not somehow true for Indians, right?
Yes.
Because Hindus actually have not had held power for almost 1,000 years,
Yes.
except for a small Maratha rule for a little bit, and the Vijayanagar Empire for a little bit. But especially in North India, right? Large swaths of North India, Hindus have not had a chance to rule for 1,000 years.
Right.
And we're suddenly saying that the people who had the very chance to rule are the minorities, and this big population, just because so many of you are still around.
Yeah.
If we ever persecuted you, how are so many of you are still around?
Yeah.
Right?
So,
So-
the biggest crime of the Hindus is their ability to survive.
Yes, and
The
they
biggest
did
crime.
not, all of them did not die.
Yeah.
So maybe when Tipu came, we should all have just fallen on our swords and killed
Exactly.
ourselves, and then we would have proven that we are the true victims.
Yes.
Because so many of you are still alive and you're reproducing at a very fast rate, that means persecution never happened to you.
Right.
And this is literally the argument that you see time and again coming from Hindu Americans sometimes, from Hindu Indians sometimes,
Right.
and you will see this as this denial of the truth. So if there was any conspiracy against history, it has definitely not been a Hindu one.
Yes.
So the fact, I think the biggest weapon for us in our fight is to tell the truth and to tell our stories, to tell our history, to do it repeatedly until everyone remembers, and most importantly, tell that to your children.
Yes.
Because that is how history propagates, right? These days we have seen a lot of people just leave the teachings to the school. Well, he goes to the school so he learns all the social context. Well, he does not.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're passing on the pain and the trauma of your ancestors onto your children, because that is the only thing they have when everybody is against them.
Yes. I think
And-
that's very fair. Sorry, go on.
Yes, like just last
Yeah.
sentence to that is that it doesn't matter which one is more threatening.
Yeah.
All of them are threatening, and a lot of them are fueled by ignorance.
Yeah.
So if we actually bring the truth to the light, we keep telling our stories until there is no breath left, until we keep remembering what our ancestors sacrificed for. That today I am a Srivastava and I am a Hindu. That we remembering their pain and their anger and their sacrifices is the most important thing for us to remember. The statistical analysis doesn't work here, and I understand where that question is coming from. Like you want to know which front to focus on.
Right.
Each of these things, the missionary evangelism strikes at a different part of dharma, where while we accept every faith, any faith that asks us to abandon our old gods is not acceptable. And we are by our philosophical structure, we are not able to make it a marketplace of religions.
Right.
I think Sankrant has a beautiful article on this.
Yeah.
on the marketplace of religion. So it's not. So that is a different aspect of it. Then you have Islamic terrorism, which is outright violence.
Right.
And then there you have these apologists for those terrorists who justify this violence by a lot of sophisticated language, as we discussed.
Right.
And then you have the liberalism. And I think liberalism movement is honestly, based on what I've seen in America, I think a lot of liberals do not have that fundamental hate against Hindus. They have a lot of appreciation for those concepts. Like you can see veganism becoming extremely popular, and a lot of times veganism even borrows the quotes from Hinduism, where protection of cows is an important element. Coexistence with all animals, all species. Abandoning speciesism is a thing. Our pluralism is a common trait with liberalism, where people accepting people for their diversity, accepting people for their individual beliefs. The problem occurs when you start imposing even that view, right? Even that view, no matter how morally superior it may sound, imposing even that is a problem.
Right.
And that is what leads to the concerns that we raised before, because that is what makes liberalism an evolution of monotheism, as you mentioned slightly on that binary worldview. So this with us or against us dynamic, because where it misses out against Hinduism is that it forgets that this can be a spectrum.
Right.
Not everybody is on the same plane of understanding as us. People are governed by their own individual experiences, and a lot of time those life experiences define who they are. And they will not all be able to think your way. But the fact that we are now imposing even this as a cultural hegemony makes it a form of colonialism. Because if you force people to be liberal, you're not making them liberal at all.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And I think it's very important that, there's voices like yours out there. And I think the more voices that are out there raising these issues, the more people they will reach. And well, one can hope the more minds they will change. So I'm very happy to have you on the show today. I'm very happy that you were able to talk to us about Holi, about the history of Holi, about the context of Holi, and enlighten us a little bit with that. So thanks very much for doing the show today, Neha. I was really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was a very fun conversation. I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. It was great fun for me too, guys. I will leave the links so you can go and follow Neha. You can check out Shaktitva. You can check out her website. You can check out her Twitter, and you can go follow her. You can follow her opinions. I'll leave all that stuff in the description as well. This episode will be available as a podcast, so you can listen to it in your own sweet time as well. Other than that, guys, Neha, stick around for a bit offline. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for all the people who left Super Chat, and I apologize if I missed any of your questions. Other than that, guys, we will see you next time. And until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I will see you guys soon.